Educate, inspire, change. Educate yourself, inspire others, change the world. Hey guys, welcome to my podcast. I'm happy to be with Josh Trent, my good friend, and we're going to be discussing light and light diet with Matt Maruca, who is the CEO and founder of Ra Optics, an amazing company that is one of the top blue light blocking companies in the world. Matt is proudly self-taught and well known in the biohacking world for his intense and deep knowledge on the topic of how natural light is necessary for optimal human life and how junk light is a leading contributor to illness and disease. Welcome to my podcast, Matt and Josh. Thank you both for joining me.
Thanks, man.
I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, as you can see, we're got your glasses on right now, and they're really
you guys are killing it. Yeah, as we discussed, I don't have mine on because I have a nice open window right now, and that's the key thing for people to learn here. Is it isn't all about the glasses; it's really about healthy circadian rhythms, healthy light exposure, which start with actually getting natural daylight. I got this window open, so that's the good stuff. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, just for all the audience who don't know about you or don't know about what your glasses do, tell me a bit about your story. What led you to creating Ra Optics, and what do these magical glasses actually do? How do they benefit our health?
Awesome question. So, I was a young guy who was really interested in optimizing my health, and I was having some serious struggles with allergies, gut issues, headaches, all these different sorts of things. And so I started looking for answers, acne, so I learned about diet and exercise and was just like, wow, this is a whole world that most people don't even know about, that you can actually change your physiology through the decisions you're making. And it's actually really powerful when you think about it and actually start to do some of this stuff. And being a young guy who was super fascinated and felt like there must be more, it brought me to the next step, which was learning about how we have these circadian rhythms, these biological clocks that kind of control all of our stuff. So all of our functions. So, for example, if our body's like a car, which it is in many ways, the food we're taking in is like fuel, like gas. And then the circadian rhythms, the way our body's timing mechanisms work, is what controls the engines. And that's what ultimately controls how well we can utilize the diets we're eating. It's a whole new level of opportunity for a lot of people to explore who have been focused on, already optimizing with diet and exercise and all that stuff. And so that led me to just, whoa, how do we impact these systems? And so one of the main drivers of our circadian rhythm, the main driver, is light exposure, because the clocks are set and almost evolved to help us adapt to a changing environment of night and day. And so getting healthy light exposure early in the morning to set our circadian rhythm, and then minimizing artificial light at night, which totally disrupts this basic system in the body, which, by the way, the Nobel Prize in 2017 was actually awarded for the elucidation of the circadian mechanism in living organisms. And so all this stuff was just one thing after the next, super fascinating, and it just opened my mind. Now I'm actually more and more interested in the next step of the light diet, as I call it, which is the spiritual light diet. But for the purposes of where my expertise lies, it's in the physical application of our light exposure.
I'm fascinated by this because I'm curious from a health perspective, man. Like you said, you had struggles. It's not every day that people create glasses like this. What was the unique struggle for you to go through the learning of the light diet?
Well, so I would say that, I was particularly, the symptoms I was having were just pretty common things like these headaches, low energy, gut issues, allergies, many things, like low mood, anxiety, certain things. And basically the diet stuff was like a huge benefit, because when you go like paleo or keto or something that's just not standard American diet, even if you go full vegan, but you're eating a healthy vegetarian vegan diet, like these are all still, some would disagree, but still steps up from like the standard American diet, right? So for me, it was like more of the paleo path, and I felt better. But where the glasses really come into the picture is when I started to learn about this whole engine story about how light controls our circadian rhythms, which optimize and control our engines. It was like, well, if I got to get light in the day and then minimize my light at night, you can't avoid it. You just can't. There's so many screens. We work on screens. You go to your friend's house or your own house and you have all these light bulbs. So like you could turn the lights off. I use like a little, what I do have is this, I use a little red light headlamp. It's like an LED thing that I'll try to find and show you later on. But it's basically a little red camping light that you would use when you're hiking in the woods. And that's all I use for light at night. And it's pretty solid. Actually, I have it right here. So it's just this red thing, but at night it's all you need. And so I keep that on my head, and when I'm reading or whatever, I use that.
Do you wear that when you go on dates as well, or you just take that off?
No, I don't. I'll wear my glasses instead. It's mostly just now if I had a girl at my house, and I would just have either no lights on or just the red lights and candles, which is not because of anything, sexual, just because
the reason I asked is because, and I'm sure both of you guys can recognize this. Sometimes when we look at biohacking, people are looking at it like it's fringe. It's like, oh, biohacking is like not for the average person, and I don't want to get these red lights, and I don't want to do all these things. If somebody's like confused about what biohacking even is and how these lights play into that for like the normal person, the everyday human, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. You know what? I have a good question for people too. Is biohacking like fringe and weird, like trying to be more aligned with nature, or is having cancer fringe and weird? Like, because right now having cancer is normal, and wearing glasses to optimize your circadian rhythm to protect the orchestra that is all of the functions in our body that need to be timed so that you don't get things like cancer is weird. So which is correct? Having the norm be people being sick and out of alignment, or having people be healthy and more aligned with nature? And that's basically the simplest way to answer the question. It's like, obviously anyone can understand that being aligned with nature, or in the misaligned world, doing things like putting on glasses to simply optimize the mechanism, which again, I mentioned just won the Nobel Prize a couple years ago for the discovery of how important it is. Like, that's just common sense. A lot of people, oh, common sense this, common sense that. Yeah, that's common sense right there, I would say.
Yeah. Someone asked a question about what is this product? We're talking about Raw Optics. Lucy, tell us where you're from. Let us know where you're from. Everybody writing in.
Yeah.
She said she's exhausted in front of the computer. Let's talk about this, man, because I'm on a big computer. Kash is on a computer right now too. It's different than when we're outside, because when we're outside, but you're in a van.
Here's the cool thing. I am in a van. So I actually got this natural light coming in. So in general, there's exceptions, but in general, if you have natural light coming in, there's a full spectrum of light, ultraviolet, infrared, that's hitting my eyes. So this outweighs the negative light from my screen, which, by the way, I also have filters on to reduce the blue light. So when the glasses really come to be the most important is especially when you're indoors and you don't have a window open to get the full spectrum. That's like what you guys both need right now. Or if you're in Kash's position where it's late at night probably, and what time is it? It's getting pretty late over there. Yeah, sun might not have set yet, but once the sun sets, you'd want to wear these night glasses. But I guess the key point is when you're not getting natural light, that's when the glasses are key, because natural light contains red, infrared wavelengths that are very healing to the body. It also contains ultraviolet wavelengths, and these wavelengths actually serve to counterbalance the negative, potentially damaging effects of blue light. The issue with screens and being indoors is they don't have any of the ultraviolet or infrared wavelengths and red that counterbalance the kind of damaging effects of blue. So blue from the sun is okay, and that's why I advocate people getting sun. But blue from all of our devices, if you don't have that healing balance of the wavelengths, can be very disruptive to our biological systems. So that's what the product is. The glasses are called blue blockers, or blue light glasses, to reduce the blue wavelengths that can disrupt a lot of the biological systems, like our body's clock and our energy production systems, as our viewer here is mentioning.
Yeah. I love the name of your business, Raw Optics. Can you explain to me the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. I don't think anyone's ever asked that on a podcast once, which is kind of crazy. Because it's funny. I sometimes kick myself. I'm like, oh, I could have picked an easier name. But for me, the key intention was, the educational piece of teaching people about Ra. So Ra is this, Greek, Egyptian god, if you will, mythological god, or just, Egyptian figure that was representative of one being the highest god of all the gods in ancient Egypt, and specifically was the god of sunlight and medicine and healing. And so Ra was in other words, of all of the deities that were worshipped by these people. And by the way, like, people kind of maybe forget this, I do too myself. People in these ancient societies were really intuitive a lot of the time. They were very connected to certain things that we've kind of lost touch with, things like the seasons, the stars, the time of year. They didn't have clocks. They didn't have all this stuff, but they knew what was happening when, based on what was happening in the environment. So Ra, of all the gods they could have picked, the sun, the moon god, the sun god, the ocean god, the crop god, the love god, like the sun god was the top. And there's a reason for that, because light is so foundational to all life on Earth. And everyone knows this intuitively from first grade. Light is so foundational to life on Earth that that's why they put it at the top of the pedestal. And it's fallen to out of most people's even realm of consciousness or awareness. And it was for me for my entire life. Never once, I don't think once in my entire life, 15 years up till that point that I started learning about this, had I ever even had the thought cross my mind that maybe the light that I'm exposed to could in any way have any impact on my health whatsoever. And when you think about that, light is the foundational building block of all of life. It's really interesting that there's such a big disconnect there.
Mm. Yeah. So what kind of modern chronic diseases do you think are directly impacted by a lack of a healthy light?
Yeah, so actually it's I want to say like a loaded question in a way, because all modern diseases are like, and I can walk people through this for the people who want a little bit more of the science, but keep it high enough level where everyone can kind of relate and understand. So in the body, I like to say what's health and what's disease. So health is the ability of an organism to carry out its functions properly, a state of balance, a state of homeostasis, if you will. And people can intuitively kind of imagine what that looks like internally and externally, because it radiates outward. And then you can imagine a state of imbalance or dis-ease where things are not functioning properly. So that's, for me, disease is when the body isn't able to carry out its functions properly. So then I like to talk about, well, what is the primary function of a living organism? I've thought about this because this is like my personal area of fascination. And so if you look from like a basic standpoint in physics, life is not a mistake. Life isn't something that just happens randomly. Life is aligned with what some would call a greater intelligence. Some would call it God, or you could just say the laws of physics. That's generally trending in the same direction, those different concepts. But so what I'm trying to say when I bring this up is that there are these rules in the universe. Again, some people call them laws of physics, some people call them God, and life is aligned with them. So my question has been, through learning about the science, how is life like aligned with the rules of the universe? There's this theory of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics in physics, that basically says that all things in the universe will ultimately tend to chaos. Like over time, all things will eventually basically spread out, and everything will entropy will always increase in the system ultimately. And that means things will become more and more chaotic. So life is this highly structured phenomenon. It almost doesn't make sense that life exists. It's almost like a kind of counterintuitive to the basic laws of thermodynamics. But the thing that makes it possible is energy. So when you have energy available in a system, it allows for there to be structure. And so life is inextricably tied to energy, right? So what life effectively does, if you look at the origin of life and the origin of the first cells, life is taking energy opportunities that are available in the universe. And I just wrote a blog post about this that would be really great to share in the show notes. But basically, life is like an investor where there's these molecules called redox couples in the universe, and life takes these two molecules that want to react together but can't because they're in some certain configuration where they actually are stuck and they can't get together. Just like two people who are in suboptimal relationships who would be in a much better relationship if they got together. There needs to be a stimulus to break them apart. So life inputs that stimulus like an investor would into a business, and then these molecules end up reacting, and their final reaction is more favorable in the eyes of the universe, and so it releases more energy. And so a good example of that is what we do. So for example, you have hydrogen, which is bound up in what we call a fuel source like food, and we have oxygen, which is actually free in the air. The oxygen and the hydrogen would love to react and make water, and that releases energy, which we can take advantage of. But because the hydrogen's bound up in a fuel source, we need to input a little bit of energy to break the hydrogens free, and then so that we react it with the oxygen, which is why we have to eat food and why we breathe. And we do this in our cellular engines called mitochondria. And then when that reaction happens, we get out more energy than we put in. So we're like an investor, basically, constantly doing these things, getting more out than we put in, ideally. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive. So that is at the highest level. That is what life is doing all the time, is basically extracting energy. Because if we didn't have energy, we wouldn't be alive. Now, a good thing to relate that to and for people to understand is like a fire. If you have a fire, the hydrogens in your leaf that you're burning, or your log, or your kindling, or your sticks, or whatever, your gasoline, all of that, they're bound up in some kind of bond, and they want to react with oxygen from the air, but they can't because they're bound up, just like our food. So you have to input some energy in the form of a spark, and it breaks those hydrogens free. They start reacting with oxygen that's free in the air. That's why if you suffocate a fire, if you take away the oxygen, it doesn't keep burning because it doesn't have any oxygen to make water. And as those hydrogens that you freed up start reacting with oxygen from the air with that initial spark, they release energy, which serves as the spark to continue to perpetuate that same reaction. So life is basically like an ongoing controlled fire. And so that might be a bit scientific for some people, but at the end of the day, the point for people to get is that we take energy from these available reactions, and anything that can improve our ability to do that is great. Now, how does that go to your question of disease? Well, when we can take the energy that we have available in our environment and utilize it properly, we carry out our functions properly, and everything works well, and we don't have what we call disease. Now, when we cannot do that anymore, our systems will start to fail. So, for example, if you had a government that had $1 trillion in annual taxpayer revenue, and so they built an entire infrastructure that used that $1 trillion of revenue every single year, and then you cut the tax base in half, and then you had $500 billion instead, you're going to not be able to carry out all the same stuff you were able to spend $1 trillion on, right? You're going to have to now basically revert to what you were able to manage with 500 billion instead of $1 trillion, basically decomplexify. And so in life, we evolved, as specifically speaking about human beings now, we evolved in an extremely energy rich environment where we lived out in nature in full spectrum sunlight, all free energy that allowed us to take advantage of this energy available basically and have these higher level functions. We evolved super high level functions, and now we are cutting away the energy that allowed that evolution to happen. And so our most energy demanding systems, which are our neocortex of our brain, which allows us to have complex problem solving and thinking. Our heart is one of our most energy demanding systems, our circulatory system, and also our eyes are extremely energy demanding. And there are other systems that are highly energy demanding too. But those are three of the biggest. Some of the biggest problems we have in society today. Everyone needs glasses. Like, imagine if a friend of mine pointed it out. He's like, how would people who need to wear glasses now have survived in nature? The answer is they wouldn't have. Having poor vision is not a genetic adaptation. It's actually just an environmental change that leads to people not to be able to carry out the energy demanding process of vision accurately or properly anymore. And so that's why
how much research do you have on that? The eyewears, like for glasses, because that's fascinating to me. I think some people are born with different eyes that function well compared to others. Don't you think that the science shows that?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's the thing. It's a question of, so there's two different genomes in the body. There's the nuclear genes, which are the genes that are passed down, obviously, from both mother and father to children, which cover primarily structure and function in an organism. And then there's genes related to energy production called mitochondrial genes, and these control our mitochondrial functioning. So I would argue, and actually the research supports, so there is good research on this, that these kinds of diseases, including myopia, which is nearsightedness, which is an epidemic today, that is not in the nuclear genes. It's in the mitochondrial genes. In other words, yes, it is genetic, so you can be born with it, just like autism. The baby didn't have the bad environment. The mother had the bad environment. Does that make sense? So the mother has a certain environment that's damaging, which causes her mitochondrial genes to be very, very much disrupted, such that when she produces an offspring, that offspring comes into the world with extremely deficient energy production systems. And that's where we see childhood cancer, autism, young It's unbelievable. I'll tell you guys. So that's really, Kash. At the end of the day, to answer your question, it's we've built a government with a tax base that needs $10 trillion a year to function, and we've cut it down to $2 trillion a year in energy production. So not only are humans facing obvious outright diseases, I would argue that even the healthiest ones of us that appear to be extremely healthy, if we had been living in the environment of our ancestors, we could even be on so many higher levels from a consciousness standpoint. But this isn't like oh no, we can't do that today. This is amazing because it shows the opportunity for each individual to excel is so far beyond what anyone really believes is possible, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I'm interested, obviously, like you sound like you've done a lot of research. You've obviously spent years and years developing this product and fine-tuning it. There are also other similar companies out there. What separates Ra Optics from the rest?
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, I think we should get back to your question about the mitochondrial stuff a little bit later on, because that's really key. And there's a researcher I want to mention. But so regarding Ra Optics being separated from the rest, the key thing, the reason I started the company was because there were two different types of blue blocking glasses or blue light glasses available at the time. There were blue light glasses that were attractive, but weren't blocking the right wavelengths of light. There's several companies like this. There's a company called Felix Gray, which is one of the biggest ones out there. There's a company called Swanwick Sleep that falls in this category. And so that was a big issue. Then all the ones on Amazon, essentially, that are these cheap ones. And the best way to tell that is if they have completely clear lenses that you can't see any yellowish color or anything like that. That means that the light that's passing through is barely changed, and therefore there is not a reduction in blue light is the best way to put it. Because when you reduce the blue significantly, the visual result of that is that the light passing through appears to be more yellow. I have a little spectrometer device that I could actually kind of use to demonstrate this a little bit more. And we will do that at some point, and we'll send some videos as well as part of what you guys had talked about earlier. But that's the key, is that these lenses, most companies weren't blocking the right wavelengths. And then the other type of lenses or companies, glasses, let's say, on the market were blocking the right wavelengths, but they were effectively like safety goggles. These things you would get on Amazon. I think you guys might have seen this, Josh. You might have been familiar with like the UVEX. These were a really big thing.
This
in
is the old school ones that like grandparents would wear, like the big blue blockers.
Well, those are, that's a good misconception to clear up. Good point. That is a company that made sunglasses called blue blockers. So that's a whole separate ballgame. They're really not even like blue light blockers. They're just sunglasses called blue blockers that focus on blocking blue light. But their premise is flawed based on what we discussed, because their premise is that you should wear them outside, which is totally off base. That's like leading to the problems we've just talked about: brain disease, eye disease, heart disease, all the stuff that happens when you deprive your body of light, especially via the eye, circadian rhythm disruption. But so the ones I'm referring to are like these safety goggles that people were buying on Amazon. They were cheap, which was great. They're like $10-15. And they blocked the right wavelengths, but they were super ugly. I'll still tell people today, if you want to just give the product a shot, go buy one of these. They're called UVEX Skyper. But the thing is, there's something that no one would ever want to wear out. And so since I knew the product worked, since I used it so much, I was like, I need to find something more attractive that blocks the right wavelengths and has great attractive frame styles. I really appreciate, Josh, your feedback. Like, they're light, they brighten up, they brighten things up. And that's the response we get from everyone. And the cool thing is, like, we're going to be, changing our frame styles, adding new hip styles as time goes on. And so it's just really great. So when it comes to the frames, they're really great quality. And that's the fun. Like I said, it's always going to be kind of improving, like any product, like the Apple iPhones. There's going to be new additions over time. But the lenses is where it really matters. And so the way that we do that is that we've worked with several experts in biology and in the field of optics to basically determine what are the wavelengths that need to be blocked, and then actually how to block those wavelengths best. So for our day lenses, the key is that you block, in our evaluation, at least 80% or more of the most damaging range of blue light. A little bit during the day is okay. So our day lenses block approximately 95%. It depends what range you specify, but of the blue light range of all of it, it's about 95%. So just enough to help with color perception, but absolutely blocking way more than enough to be super safe during the day, no matter how much blue light you're exposed to. On the other hand, our night lenses, what's really important is that they block all the light, blue and green, up to 550 nanometers because the reason why this is blocking a much broader wavelength, and that's why they're darker. Yeah, exactly. That's why they're darker. That's why they are appearing much more red. And the reason for that is because in the day, it's okay to have more light, but at night, you really want to give a much stronger stimulus, or I should say lack of light stimulus, for the brain to be able to make melatonin optimally. So if you wear the day lens, this is a common question. If you wear the day lenses at night, you're still going to get a massive benefit compared to like almost all the other companies out there that are selling clear lenses for day and for night, which is absurd based on the research. But you're going to get an even greater benefit for your sleep if you wear those night lenses at night instead of the day lenses. So
plus, it's closer to when we were at the fire. We were at a fireplace and we were in tribes. And so those red lights really are like us sitting around a fire.
Whilst in Costa Rica last year, I came across a guy by the name of Anthony Walsh who handed me a bottle of hemp extract CBD oil. And after just taking a few drops, I was sold. I immediately felt more relaxed, less stressed. I found the quality of my sleep improved, and it even helped me with my meditation practices. The reason this product stands out for me was Anthony himself is passionate about healing the world one person at a time, and has personally invested thousands of hours researching CBD and cannabinoids in order to fully understand how to help guide others to receive the maximum benefits of taking hemp oil extracts. His company is called Eco Life Supplements, and I highly recommend it to anyone that wants to have a better, happier, and healthier life. It's 100% natural, organically grown, all natural and non-GMO guaranteed for your best experience. To order yours now, please visit ecolifesupplements.com and quote coupon code INSPIRECHANGE for a 10% discount, and they are currently only delivering in the US.
Because most people watching, and let us know if you guys have questions too. Like there's been a lot of science he's been dropping on us. There's so much around this blue light blocking, but people don't realize, like at night, man, when we're looking at our phones, that's what upregulates the pineal gland and it downregulates melatonin. So we're looking at our screen. Next thing you know, you have poor sleep. You have this artificial light coming in your eyes. Can you talk about sleep in this one? Because most people are pretty tired right now.
Oh, this is a great point to go back to our science conversation earlier on. So when it comes to sleep, like you hit it right on the head. Circadian rhythms is this amazing system in the body that controls so much. Our circadian rhythm, they were evolved because on a high level, an organism, and everyone intuitively knows this, but any organism that can adapt to its environment better than another is going to have a higher chance of surviving. So it kind of follows that if you have an environment where you have constantly the same change all the time, or a rhythmical change, you might want to kind of adapt to that first and foremost so that you got your bases covered. And then you can be able to adapt to like a lion chasing after you every once in a while, right? But if you can't adapt to the most common change on a daily basis on Earth on a regular basis, light versus dark, then you're going to have serious issues. So it makes sense that every single living organism has circadian rhythms in it. And in fact, based on the research, every single gene in the body is linked with a clock gene. So our circadian rhythm doesn't just control things like our sleep-wake cycle, our hormone production, our metabolic activity, basically all of our organ systems, because everything needs to be timed, and we can touch on that more. It also controls our expression of our genes. A good way to think about it is like an orchestra. If you have a bunch of people playing, they might all sound great individually, but if they can't be perfectly timed together, even if the timing is off by like milliseconds, the orchestra will sound horrible. So that's why you need the master conductor to keep everyone exactly in a rhythm. And so that's what the circadian rhythm is. It's an approximately 24-hour cycle. Circa in Latin means approximately, and dies means day. So it's approximately a day cycle, circadian rhythm, that follows, obviously, the 24-hour period of light and dark, which is the 24-hour period
that's
that it takes for the
man.
Earth. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
And that 24 hours is how long it takes for the Earth to do what? To rotate around its own axis once, one full circle, and that means day and night. That's one full day. And that's what a circadian rhythm is.
One thing I love is that science tells us there's photoreceptors in the eye. So when we have light coming in the eye, that's what actually signals the rest of the homeostatic mechanism to turn on so that we're alive. Right? So if we have light shining, if we have photoreceptors turning on in our eyeballs at night, and we're not having some kind of a healthy shield, then we could potentially have like poor digestion, mood swings. If anybody's dealing with this, let us know, because like People don't know about this. That's why we're here talking about it.
It's insane. So I just actually, so the one of the reasons I mentioned this to you, that we were just getting started a little bit delayed, was got a call. So one of the reasons that I was a little bit delayed here was I was driving. I was doing some photo shooting this morning, actually talking about these concepts. So you guys got me. I'm super fresh. Like, I've been just talking all day. And there was a biker who lost his tire. His tire went flat and basically was so far from the road, like 15 miles. And so we drove him back down to the coast so he could get to his car and not risk sliding out on these treacherous roads and fog and everything. But he is this super fit. He's like, actually turns out to be one of the biggest guys in the Tough Mudder races, CrossFit games in the whole world, who just happened to be up in the Malibu mountains. It was really funny.
Did you give him a pair of glasses?
Oh, I'm getting him hooked up. Don't worry about it. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So really cool guy. And he was, he's doing all this super hard work when it comes to training and all this other stuff. And it's like he's crushing it and putting in effort where it matters. But on a simple thing like circadian rhythms, like imagine you have that orchestra and one person's out of sync, or more likely, if you don't have a conductor, multiple of the instruments are out of sync. Like, you can be working out hard, you can be doing all this other stuff that's so important, and have a mess up in timing by having blue light coming through your eye at night. And that literally, like you said, it's that simple. We have these light receptors in our eye that, in addition to our color vision, are what we call non-visual receptors, which are controlling non-visual systems in the body. And if that's off, all of a sudden all these other systems can basically be off. And this is especially if we're not getting sunlight, especially early in the morning around sunrise. This is why one of my mentors, named Dr. Jack Kruse, is such an advocate for people getting out and watching the sunrise, which is interesting, back to educate, inspire, change, because watching the sunrise, this concept of sun gazing, has been around for like 5,000 plus years in ancient India. And they've known that this actually leads to elevated consciousness, elevated cognitive function, surprisingly enough, elevated melatonin production. So getting more exposure to the proper light in the morning hours, especially when the sun first rises, stimulates the production of all these hormones so that they can be and neurotransmitters that they can be properly secreted at night once it's all said and done. And so to me, it's like what you said couldn't be more on point. Sleep, circadian rhythms, they're driven by this amazing basic cycle that I was getting into. And the key thing is that that whole cycle is controlled by light. So it's like you're looking for a low hanging fruit to get high leverage results to improve your health. Just start by getting your circadian rhythm dialed in, which means simplest steps. And these are the key takeaways of the light diet for anyone who's just here and maybe isn't listening further, or maybe they want to listen further to hear all the good stuff. But you watch the sunrise in the morning, or at least go outside in the morning light for minimum 5, but ideally at least 15 minutes, or as long as you can. If you can take an hour walk, or eat your breakfast on the patio, or drink your coffee on the patio, even if it's cloudy, you're still getting the benefit. That's a start. And then not eating late is huge, because eating late causes the body to be all heavy and having to digest. And this is, again, ancient Ayurvedic wisdom at the same time, because I know, Kash, probably a lot of your tribe is interested in this ancient wisdom, and it's super valid. They always recommend eating your biggest meal either breakfast or midday, when the pitta energy, the fire energy, is strongest, and keeping it really small in the evening. So the circadian rhythm science lines up perfectly with old Western research. And like you said, you could have gut issues because the circadian, the cells in the body that turn over the quickest are the gut cells. And, the lungs turn over quickly and the skin turns over pretty frequently. But the gut cells turn over like every 48 hours if our circadian rhythm works properly. If it doesn't, you have serious issues. And this is really interesting. I don't want to talk about cigarettes necessarily, because they're super bad for people. But if you look at people, there's societies where people have smoked cigarettes for a long time and they don't even get lung cancer. It's like, how is that? There's the woman who lived longer than anyone else ever recorded in modern age. She smoked cigarettes until she was like 110 years old, and she quit for the last 12 years of her life. Like, can you imagine? She lived longer than anyone else and she never had a disease. She died of old age. It's like crazy. And so again, based on this evidence, I'm not advocating anyone smoke cigarettes, but the way that could be possible, given the theory that cigarettes cause lung cancer, is really that the cigarettes are the trigger, but it's the cigarettes are like the bullets. The bad things we do are like the bullets, but the environment and the disabling of our natural detox and repair mechanisms is the trigger that fires the bullet. It's, it's basically what fires the gun, so there's the bullets and then you fire the gun with your bad environment. And that's really a key concept that's just so far out there right now, but the science is right behind it.
It's fascinating.
Great questions.
Yeah, tell me, Matt, did you have any mentors that helped you educate you? Dr. Jack Kruse is one of them, I think. Can you tell me a bit more about him?
Yeah. Oh, man. I mean, I seem smart. It's just because I've learned from people who are way smarter than me, like just a couple really good ones. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Jack Kruse is this really, I'd say, he's a genius. He's a neurosurgeon who is big in the United States. And he was a big guy in the paleo diet community for a while, but kind of
pretty controversial at one point, right?
Very controversial was the word I was going to use, actually. So the reason for the controversy is he's a very strong personality. We can put it that way. Very adamant because he cares so much. I've seen him come to tears when talking about how much he cares about his patients who have been sort of lied to by the medical profession and sold on these ideas that you can heal all your diseases with just diet and exercise, which works for some people, but doesn't work for everyone necessarily. So that's his whole focus is that basically what I've talked about today is that our diet and exercise play a role, but additionally our exposure to light, which controls our circadian rhythm, which controls our mitochondrial energy production, which goes back to that initial whole discussion of if we make energy well, then we're going to be healthy. If we can't, we're going to have what we call diseases, dysfunctions of our different systems, whether it's the brain or the heart or the eye or, wherever we're demanding the most energy in the body. That's where, Alzheimer's and heart disease are two of the biggest killers today. And stroke is a cardiovascular disease. So it's related to the heart. And therefore it's a huge, huge issue. And that's his focus, but there's many others. Another one, and this goes back to Josh, your question about, mitochondria and the vision and the inherited things with young kids who certainly didn't mess up their environment themselves. There's a guy who I would love everyone to look at and who would be a phenomenal guest, actually. And I don't know if he does podcasts, but I could definitely try to make that connection. His name is Dr. Douglas Wallace. He's a researcher at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He's worked at Stanford. He's worked at Vanderbilt, I believe. A lot of other really esteemed universities in the United States. He's just to give all this sort of credentials in a way. He's part of some of the highest ranking research clubs in the world of the leading scientists, like this Italian Academy of Sciences, some of the most esteemed groups in the world. He's won some of the highest awards for his work. And most people don't even know about him. That's the crazy part, because someone told me once on average, oh, sweet, I just got a glasses delivery. Dude, thank you so much.
This is live podcasting in full effect right here. I love
this is awesome. Thanks, Max. Oh, dude, he's the best. Yeah, we were shooting and I left all my glasses in his bag and then he went off to just chill. And anyway, I was like, oh no, every single pair. How did that happen? But anyway, so we'll do some testing to show actually that with the spectrometer what the lenses are blocking before we're done here. But I'm still not going to put them on because I want to get this good light. That's the thing. But so basically the key thing is, I'll show one really nice style we have though. It's like this really kind of circular. Some people like this metal action going on here, so I'll just throw them on for looks. But anyway, so Dr. Wallace, guys, everyone needs to know who he is, because all of us know about the work, but very few people know about who he is. So he was starting to study genetics in the 60s. He's old now, he's in his 70s, late 70s, and all his colleagues were studying nuclear genetics because genes had been discovered in the late 50s, I believe, at Stanford University by these guys, not Watson and Crick. I believe it was Watson and Crick, but I could be messing up the names. It was Watson and Crick. Anyway, so genetics were the biggest thing for the last 50, 60 years, and they, to a certain extent, still are. Now, the issue with the genetic paradigm is that if you're studying the nuclear genes for disease, you're basically saying that if someone has a disease, it's a problem in their genes and it's a problem that they inherited. And the only way you can solve it is by taking a drug. You couldn't change your environment. You couldn't do anything. That's what the nuclear genetic model of disease basically is saying. And that is the mainstream paradigm that everyone's aware of. And most of us, at least today here, are aware of how flawed that paradigm is. It's totally not accurate. And Josh, I know you know this. You've interviewed all these amazing people who talk about this stuff. So there's that. And then there's the mitochondrial genome, which is the other one that no one was studying. So he started studying it. And just the first thing that they discovered using mitochondrial genes, which is really, really powerful stuff, is that they're maternally inherited. So in other words, our nuclear genes are inherited from both parents. Like we have, characteristics visually of both parents. But mitochondrially, we look exactly like our mothers. There's no mixing going on. And the reason why is because even the nuclear genes are kind of like a blueprint for a house. You can kind of mix up different house blueprints, or even better, a blueprint for like a power plant. The power plant, the structure of the actual building doesn't really matter. You can have different blueprints mixed up, but the wiring diagram has to be extremely highly coordinated for the energy production in that power plant to work properly. If you mixed up the wiring diagrams with every new power plant, it wouldn't work. And so what they've done, so that's what they discovered, is the result of that need for mitochondrial uniparental, it's called, inheritance coming from one parent, is the reason why there are two sexes. That's the reason why there are males and females, and one is distinctly the one that always carries the children and one doesn't. The one that carries the children is the one that passes the mitochondria along, and that's what we call women. It isn't like women are the ones that do this. It's like the ones that do this are the ones we call women, because this is the cause of two sexes. It's pretty foundational.
Man, you know what? I think it's fascinating because most people forget, like, mitochondria, they're not just the powerhouse of the cell. They're also ancient energy systems, like the most ancient thing in the entire world or the universe. Can you contrast mitochondria and epigenetics? Because, genes load the gun, environment pulls the trigger.
You're the man.
Chris
I love
Kresser,
this
right? So contrast those two.
Dude, it's so what's funny is you can't contrast them because they are the same thing. So this is, dude, it's the best question I've ever been asked on a podcast practically. The mitochondria are the mechanism by which epigenetics are expressed. So the entire field of epigenetics, this is why I like talking about this guy, Dr. Wallace, the entire field of epigenetics is all mitochondrial. So the best way to put this is, for example, Chris Kresser, you said environment loads the gun, or genes load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. Sort of. It's not exactly 100% like that when they're not focused on mitochondria, which they kind of are, but not enough, in my opinion. So basically, anytime you change your environment, does that affect your nuclear genes first, or does it affect your mitochondrial genes more? And the answer is it affects the mitochondrial genes significantly more quickly and significantly more overall in the body. The reason why is because the nuclear genes, they're not static. They're constantly being expressed and turned on and turned off. So they're not static at all, but they're less changing than the mitochondrial genes. What I mean by that, or why that is the case, is because for every single cell that has one set of nuclear genes, there are approximately 1,000 mitochondria, which means 1,000 mitochondrial DNAs. So if you have 100 or 50 to 100 trillion cells in the average adult human, that means that you have about 1,000 times 100 trillion mitochondrial genes. So you have 100 trillion human genome sets. You have it's like 14, it's something like 10 or 14 quintillion.
More numbers than we could ever even imagine.
More numbers than you could imagine, because it's, again, every one genome, which we have a ton of, we have 1,000 of the mitochondrial genome. So they react much more quickly, and within the life cycle of a single cell, which is already pretty quick, the mitochondria are turning over way, way, way more within the life cycle of that cell. So any change you make in your environment is much more quickly being picked up and affecting our mitochondrial energy production systems. And so in a way, the mitochondria are not all evolution, but the majority of evolution is mediated by mitochondria, because what happens is you change the environment, it changes mitochondrial energy production. And think about it, the nuclear genes require, just like anything in the body, they require what? Energy to be expressed, right? And so if you change mitochondrial energy production, which everything we do, think, and eat, and do every day affects, that is what changes the ability of the nuclear genes to be expressed. So the mitochondria, it goes environment, mitochondria, nuclear genes. There's a thing called mitonuclear coaptation, which is the mitochondrial energy status affects nuclear genes. And where this gets really interesting is if the mitochondria work well, which means we're making good decisions in our environment, like getting the right light exposure, not eating super late, sleeping well, not being exposed to a ton of toxins. All of these things allow our mitochondria to make energy more efficiently, which means that we keep the mitochondria energy production up, which keeps the necessity of turning on the nuclear genes and making more proteins, a process called ubiquination, or ubiquination, protein turnover. We keep that down. So effectively what we want as organisms to keep our energy production up, so that we keep the need for the genes to be expressed down, because that saves our stem cells, that saves our telomere lengths, that saves so many things in the body if we just have higher energy production, because we can maintain our existing proteins and our existing systems much better and not have to keep remaking those proteins and keep doing that over and over and over again because our environment's so damaging to us. That's really the key for longevity. So the issue with the thing that Chris Kresser's Institute could focus more on is the impact of light, because it is one of the main drivers of mitochondria. So freaking amazing question. And I just want to go back to this guy, Dr. Wallace, a little bit more. Ultimately, the thing he discovered after discovering this uniparental inheritance, they also were able to map migration of humans and confirm effectively the theory of human evolution and migration. If you've ever seen a map of humans migrating out of Africa, from the cradle of humanity in East Africa into Europe, into the United States, they were able to figure that out because with nuclear genes, you mix them every generation. You can't tell who's coming from where. It's almost impossible. It's very, very challenging because it's all mixed. With mitochondrial inheritance of genes, because they're not being spliced every generation, there is, the way Dr. Wallace says it, is the number of mitochondrial gene changes is directly proportional to the amount of time since the last common ancestor between two mitochondria. So it's like, rather than being completely all mixed in every generation, it's single changes over time in the mitochondrial genes. So using that data, they were able to 100% confirm by testing Native Americans and Asians and Europeans, all of the mitochondrial lineages that branched out of Africa. Because in Africa, there were only 3, and now there's dozens all around the world. And it's super fascinating. So that's cool stuff he discovered. But the key thing to our question and the discussion today is that he was studying rare mitochondrial diseases, thinking that was kind of the focus. But when all of his colleagues in the nuclear genetic research field, basically mainstream medicine, were just not able to find the cure for diseases when they spent trillions of dollars on researching the nuclear genes, the ultimate takeaway was that, all of these diseases include what appears to be a form of mitochondrial dysfunction. And so when they started to look, the results are astounding. Every single modern chronic disease, and this gets to that point we brought up initially of these systems failing, heart disease, Alzheimer's, stroke, cancer, autoimmune diseases, diabetes, obesity, autism, Parkinson's, like every disease that you can imagine that isn't an infectious disease like coronavirus or tuberculosis. The things, infectious diseases until coronavirus haven't really been a big issue at all. Spanish flu, tuberculosis, they're big issues in third world countries, but not in the developed world. That's what used to kill people. It doesn't kill people anymore. Then there's genetic diseases, which are like very rare as well. Down syndrome, Tay-Sachs syndrome, sickle cell anemia. These are very, very rare. They're less than 10% of all diseases. And combined, the viral diseases and genetic diseases, or I shouldn't say just viral, bacterial, infectious diseases, they're all still less than 15% of diseases in the industrialized, modernized world. 85+% of diseases are our bodies failing themselves, what people call degenerative or chronic or modern diseases. And they're not genetic. They're in a sense, they're genetic, they're mitochondrial genetic, but they're really environmental. And that is their mitochondrial diseases, effectively. So heart disease, all these diseases, they've been able to see those specific tissues are having mitochondrial damage, which results in lowered energy production. And it's unbelievable. The paradigm shift is huge.
Profound. You really are a man of knowledge, I have to say. Like, where do you get all this stuff from? Have you been studying for many, many years?
I'm super fortunate, honestly, that, again, Jack Kruse was a huge mentor to get me super interested in this. I learned from, at first, like Mark Sisson in the paleo world, just opened my eyes to this concept. Oh, your environment can actually affect your genes. So it was like, that was the first stimulus. And I'm just super fortunate. I've just read from some really great people.
Yeah, no, I love your passion. And obviously at Educate, Inspire, Change, we're now aligning with some brands like yourself. And I love your passion. I love your drive. I love your purpose. I love what your product does. I really feel the benefits of them. So I'd love to let people at Educate, Inspire, Change know that to our community only, you're offering them 15% off, I think, just now. Yeah. If they use the code EIC15, can you let people know where to go and where to visit your website and where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website is Raw Optics. So thank you for asking the clarifying question earlier. That's just RA Optics, not RAW. And that's rawoptics.com. And that's the best place where, right now we have I'd say a very simple website. It's just straight to the point. But in the next couple of weeks and months, we're going to start pumping out a huge amount of content. I've started building up a team so I can focus more on this educational work, which is really, as you can tell, where my passion lies. And we're going to be able to build that up so people can come back there in the next couple of weeks and months for tons of blogs and educating videos and content and science and articles and research. And that'll be really awesome. And then likewise, people can go to my personal Instagram is The Light Diet because I'm focused on teaching about light. And that's just a great place where here and there I'll make some information. And as I focus more on that, I'll do more of that. And then same with Raw Optics. Our Instagram is raw_optics. That's RA_optics. And again, we're just working on sharing more and more informational content and great photos that people can look at of the glasses. And yeah, that's really where we are. I appreciate you giving us that the shout out here. And people can use that code. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, guys. I need to head off shortly. But is there any final words from Josh and from Matt from you to our audience?
Yeah, I had a question for you. One of the big things you struggled with was migraines. We had someone from the UK writing in that she is struggling with migraines. As we say goodbye, Matt, share with us just how this truly impacts migraines when you wear these glasses.
It's a loaded question. I mean, no, it's not a loaded question. It's a good question.
Give us the low level science,
I'll give I'd say high level, just overview. So two things. A lot of light has this thing called the flicker effect. Screens often do. Indoor fluorescent lights have this flickering that sometimes you can see it, but usually you can't. So that triggers migraines. And so the key thing is that the blue wavelengths in particular, the flicker of the blue wavelengths, our glasses can't eliminate flicker from lights, but what they do is they eliminate the wavelengths that are the most damaging, that are flickering. For example, if you have a flickering of a red wavelength, it's much less damaging because red's not super damaging to the body. But if you have a flicker of the blue wavelengths, it's overwhelming. So that can trigger migraines. The other thing is that a migraine is kind of like what we talked about in this energy production whole thing we've discussed. The optimal energy production is like New York City with full power. There's a blackout is when the power goes all the way down, which means you're dead. That's not good. These diseases, including migraines and other diseases, they're more like a brownout, which means all the systems don't shut off entirely, but the energy production is lowered. And this guy, Dr. Wallace, uses the example of a brownout that he experienced. The most energy demanding things in their office, the computers, and those all shut off first, and the other stuff stayed running like the lights. Eventually that shuts off too in a blackout. So the migraine is like a brownout in the mitochondria in your brain. The best things you can do right away are get a little bit of cold exposure. We're going to have to do another one of these lives eventually, Kash. Definitely. Do that. But cold exposure.
Let's do one with you in the cold tank.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be great. So
that'd be a good one.
Cold exposure for the migraine, stick your head in the freezer, go outside in the natural sunlight as much as you can, and get blue blockers to block the blue light at night and during the day. If you have to work indoors, you'll need day and night glasses. And cool. That'll be – so that's awesome. Yeah.
That's some great tips. That's some great tips. So I hope the listener from the UK heard him clearly there. That was awesome. Thanks, man.
I really hope so. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak. And I really hope that, and I'm just, anyone who's listening to this, it's awesome that you're on this journey because we have a long way to go and we're all just kind of, in many ways just getting started, like the grasshopper mindset here. So really cool to speak with everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Kash and Josh. Mm-hmm. I'm super, super excited. And Kash, when you move to Costa Rica, if that's something that's ever, you're talking about, go down there. I'd love to visit. And Josh, we're going to have to connect in Cardiff because I'm living in Cardiff right now.
I know. I love it, man. This is the beauty of podcasting. You're in a van close to where I live. Kash is in the UK and I'm here in Cardiff. This is pretty brilliant, right? The technology that makes these glasses, all this stuff comes from imagination, man. So thanks for your imagination, Matt.
Thank you,
Thank you guys too for making this happen. Yeah. Really great.
It's been a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to partnering with you for the future as well.
Oh, likewise. It's going to be awesome.
Epic.
All right.
All right, guys.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. Peace.
Educate, inspire, change. Educate yourself, inspire others, change the world. I'm proud to say that one of the first sponsors I have for this podcast is Rhythmia Life Advancement Centre. Rhythmia is a unique and special place to me. It's a healing resort fused with ayahuasca, meditation, breathwork, yoga, and lots of other metaphysical teachings. And they really sent me on a journey of healing and self-discovery that ultimately led to the creation of this podcast. So I really do owe Rhythmia a lot. And if you would like to go there and have a healing journey of your own, please visit them on their website at rhythmia.link/Khan, spelled Khan, or give them a call on 877-835-1806 and receive a free shuttle worth $300 off your trip. For the last year and a half, I've been working on a documentary called Pantera. It's a documentary series, and each series will follow me around a different plant medicine retreat. The first episode, Pantera, Our Plant Medicine Journey Begins, is due to be released in the coming weeks. If you would like to keep up to date with what we're doing and receive the latest updates and releases, sign your name at pantera.film.